So I'm with Rabbi Ahrens in Darmstadt in Germany. Yeshua, what's happening at the moment in Germany in terms of the impact of COVID-19? And in particular, I'm interested in the Jewish response and how it's coping with what's going on, and it's in terms of practice and observance.
I think the situation here in Germany was much better than in most of the European countries. And I think that it makes a difference, of course, also about how to react also religiously. So the synagogues were closed. And of course, we had to do a lot of online programming. I was also very much involved in that. Services, celebrations, lectures, all kind of work. But now actually, lately, the synagogues reopened. So we have a situation now that we kind of go back to normal. Of course, we have many different rules connected with synagogue service. We need to have certain distances, social distances also in the synagogue. Prayer is a little different. The length of the prayers are different and so on. But basically, we are going back to normal.
And what lessons are there, do you think, in terms of what's happened? And of course, it's carrying on, isn't it? The whole issue of social distancing. What lessons are there? What lessons are you teaching as a rabbi of a community?
I think there are several issues and lessons. I mean, first of all, digitization is progressing. And I think I'm a big fan of that. I think it is positive generally. We can reach out to people that are usually less affiliated with the community. We can connect internationally, for example, at the Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day. We could connect with the community in Israel. Usually we cannot do that when we have a celebration in the synagogue. There are many possibilities. We are much more flexible. On the other hand, I can also see the problems. There is a risk that elderly people who are not good in modern technologies cannot connect, and they are more isolated than before. And of course, we could see that having a community or being community is much different online or virtually than it is actually in the synagogue and in the community center. So the idea of minyan, of have a prayer quorum, for example, in Jewish tradition, that goes very much with the synagogue and with a physical being in a place, meeting, having encounter. And I think this is something that is, of course, a downside. But nevertheless, I think technologies can and should be used also in the future. Now, let's say spiritually, it is of course a question of are we going back to normal, or is there anything we can learn out of this crisis? I mean, we Jews, we have kind of in our DNA the idea of doing something good out of something bad. That is our approach. And I think it's very helpful also in this situation. Again, in Germany, probably the problems were less dramatic than in other European countries. But of course, we have suffering, and we had problems connected to COVID-19, economically, socially, and so on. People died, people suffered. But on the other hand, if we can really learn out of it, if we can, as Jonathan Sachs, actually the former chief rabbi of the UK, put it, come from an I to a we, then it would be actually a great thing. So I think people understood that there are certain challenges that we can only cope together with. So we have a joint responsibility for the society, or even globally. And the better we work together, the better the results. As you can see, for example, also in the different countries as how they reacted actually to COVID-19. Now, this gives the opportunity maybe to look beyond the virus and see if we can cope with this challenge of COVID-19 together and globally. And I think all together we were quite successful. Can we do the same maybe with other issues, with question social problems, let's say, here in Germany, or maybe environmental issues on a global level, with fragmentation in Europe, for example, and European nationalism. So I think there are certain things we can learn and use.
There's a temptation when there's a crisis to go down two routes. One route is the collaborative route, the we, as you put it. Another is the I. And there are a number of countries that are being more competitive, shall we say, in the way that they're responding to it over and against others. And there are some that obviously want to do it more collaboratively. Now, in your actual pastoral work, is there a development of a new sense of community that's beyond the vague, beyond the metaphor, beyond the theory, that's actually happening on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a sense of solidarity and helping others, offering help. It's very seldomly you've seen so many people being engaged in the community life, even if it's virtually. For example, doing the shopping for elderly people and bringing to them, taking care of isolated people, calling them, for example, or speaking via Zoom and other means of technology, staying in touch with the own family or with the community, coming together in prayer, for example, where it was possible. So I think there's something really in communal life that had an impact on the people and on the sense of community. I think also, actually, if I may add, like specifically in Orthodox Judaism, I can see something very interestingly, and that is that halakha, Jewish law, became a little more flexible and a little more dynamic in that sense, because we had to cope with certain situations. For example, the Pesach, the Passover Seder evening. Several rabbis in Israel and also outside Israel permitted that family members connect via Zoom on the Seder evening, which is usually in Orthodoxy not allowed. So we can see there is creativity in halakha and Jewish law, and if we can use that creativity for other situations as well, I think it's bringing us forward. Because in the last years, it seemed that sometimes it's becoming more dogmatic and less flexible and creative, and so I'm very glad about that.
So it's as if it's released some of those creative juices which sit there in the writings and amongst the rabbis. And what about beyond the Jewish community? We've touched on the concept of neighbor or community and presumably neighborhood as well. I wonder if we could end with some reflections on its impact on the interreligious conversation. Germany today is an incredibly diverse society, pretty secular in many ways, like the UK, but in terms of its minorities, both in terms of ethnicity, but also in terms of religion, much more diverse than even 10 or 15 years ago. So what's happening in terms of the interreligious encounter in Germany?
Yeah. First of all, the interreligious work also continued. So also online, there were different programs, conferences, lectures, debates, and so on. So I'm very glad that also continued. And I think there is a good chance that interreligious work might strengthen after the crisis. We were confronted with many ethical questions. Who shall live and who shall die? Who can we help and who can we not help? What about the restrictions? What if it saves somebody, but somebody else suffers from these restrictions? What shall we do? And who can give guidance? Who can give ethical, who has the values and who can give the guidance? I think it's the religions who are the ones who can offer something, offer answers, or at least better questions to all these challenges. And I can see that people become more spiritual and question a lot more these things. And we know that in Germany today, there is not one religion specifically who could give the answer, but it is actually that we have to do together, and there is also a certain need. Also, of course, the sense of solidarity, of working together in coping the challenges, strengthened interreligious work. So it's not specifically interreligious work, but I think generally as a society, it's also probably the outcome that people realized there are certain issues or topics or missing the word, that sometimes something like the healthcare, for example, it cannot be subordinate under the market logic, but it is something where we all have a shared responsibility, and it is something the state has to guarantee, or us as society as a whole, we have to carry it. And this strengthened all these common efforts and work.
Rabbi Joshua Ahrens, thank you very much.